Hi, and thank you for tuning in to the Daily Dose for Spiritual Growth. This week, we are talking about timing. We're talking about beginnings and endings and where we see God in it. Now, yesterday, if you were with me, I challenged you to consider this past year, 2025, to think about what things began and what things ended and where you saw God in it. Today, I want to read a passage of scripture to you from the book of Ecclesiastes. And those of you that are familiar, you might right away know what passage I'm about to read. But if not, this book is an interesting one. It was written by King Solomon. King Solomon was an incredible man, David's son, and yet he really found everything in this world caused him to feel empty when he had it. You know, so many of us strive to have things or prestige or power or money. Solomon had all of that. And yet what he says throughout this book is that he found it was meaningless. But you know what? There's a very interesting passage in chapter 3 where Solomon talks about time. And I want to read that to you today. It's found in chapter 3, beginning in verse 1 through verse 8. It says, "For everything there is a season, a time for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to harvest, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build up, a time to cry and a time to laugh, a time to grieve and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to turn away, a time to search and a time to quit searching, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be quiet, and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace." What an interesting passage. I want to encourage you today that if you have some moments to go through and read this passage through slowly, to take your time with it. Again, it's Ecclesiastes chapter 3, just verses 1 through 8. But in here, what I want us to consider today is considering 2025. What time was it? In 2025, was it a time that you cried? Or what were the moments when you laughed? Were there a time that you found yourself searching? And was there times when you found yourself saying, you know what? I'm done searching. Were there times when you tended to plant, or did you find 2025 as a season of harvest? You know what? Everything under heaven has a beginning and has an end. And as we learned today, there's a timing, a season for everything. So like yesterday, take a few moments and consider, what season were you in 2025? But what I want us to think about a little bit more today is, what season are you about to go into? When it comes to these timings, this kind of this or that, what are you praying that God will do in 2026? Maybe some of you have been in a season where you feel like there's been death, and you're praying, God, would you bring life in 2026? Maybe but there's been a season where you've been at war within yourself or in a group of people, your family, and you're praying, God, would you bring peace in 2026? Maybe there's been a season where you've been holding on to things. You've been keeping them. And in 2026, you're praying that through God's strength and courage that you could let them go and throw them away. We need wisdom in this. We need trust in this. We need dependency on God in this. But I encourage you today, what are you hoping? What are you praying? What are you desiring that God would do in your life in 2026? What season are you hoping you'll be in? You know, pray those things with boldness and trust the Lord that He will prepare you. You know, as I think back on 2025, there's some things that if I would have been told in advance that I was going to face, I would have thought, oh, Father, there's no way that I can do this. There's some really difficult things that happened in my life in 2025, some unexpected things, some painful things. And yet, as I reflect on 2025, God was so faithful to me. And I recognize now that there were things that He had done previously that prepared me spiritually, emotionally, even physically for some of the challenges that I would face this past year. And so with confidence, I go into this new year, not yet knowing what I will face, hopeful of what I desire to face, but also trusting with confidence that no matter what season God leads me into in this coming year, that He is good and He is faithful. But take some time today and talk to God in reflection and in anticipation of what is ending and what is beginning. Hey, I want to thank you so much for tuning in today, and I hope to see you again tomorrow for another daily dose for spiritual growth.